This program is brought to you by Globus.
Hello, good people of Africa. It's a pleasure to be here again on another edition of your discursive and knowledge sharing program. It is the Global Insider. And today we continue to take focus on what is affecting the global world, bringing to a standstill the advantages of globalization and international cooperation. And so today our focus is on the global war of influence. Today's world dynamics demand, of course, a deeper understanding of world affairs, especially to mitigate the severe effects of power struggles among world powers on humanity. Our focus on Global Insight this day is on the global war of influence, intense competition among major powers to shape international norms, diplomacy, economics, and alliances, and also the cultural dynamics without direct military conflict. This war, according to a report, is subtle, yet its effects spread like wildfires across a grass field, upsetting the global status quo. Pundits, however, identify key tools like economic sanctions, cyber operations, cultural diplomacy, proxy partnerships, and media campaigns, among others, as being catalysts or tools that the different actors, the global actors, use to attain the defined objective, while soft power, according to reports, still avoids physical confrontation. Its consequences are often devastating or horrendous, escalating tensions, fostering constant confrontation, and eroding the fabric of humanity, which is, of course, very imperative as to why we live in the world. We can also cite examples of such global wars of influences, the U.S.-China rivalry over Taiwan and the South China Sea. We have the Ukraine proxy war, U.S.-Israel pressures on Iran, disinformation through media campaigns, and which we can also, put it to be some sort of a media war. Looking at the petrodollar tactics, recent was the case in Venezuela, where we saw the kidnapping of its president. And we can also forget the proxy wars across the Middle East, and not forgetting how Africa gets entangled in these global wars of influence, which is why we have come together as pundits note that often countries will always weaponize the struggles of susceptible or poor people, turning them against their pressured government. And that is why we'll see that one effect of such a global war of influence is a regime change, which to an extent would change a whole lot of things regarding the internal and foreign policy standing of countries. So with a panel of experts, we aim to help our diverse viewers out there to understand what the war of influence is all about, to grasp its high stakes, especially in this present global dynamics, from economic disruptions to alliance shifts, and also explore practical strategies nations can use to navigate to this global war of influence effectively without destroying, beg your pardon, the precious fabric of human life. And of course, without much ado, we're going to uncover the panel at this particular juncture to dive straight, of course, to the analysis of this very important and timely topic. Let's get now to Russia precisely to Moscow, and welcome Dragana Trifkovic, Director General of the Center for Geostrategic Studies, who is also from Serbia. It's a pleasure having you this day, dear Dragana.
My pleasure, dear Clarice, to discuss again with you and to be again in your program.
Absolutely looking forward to having a still constructive discussion that will help situate the world, understanding the real stakes as we continue to navigate the changes or the unavoidable global changes in our society. To India, we acknowledge the presence of Professor Jagdish Khatri, author and global analyst. Welcome today.
Namaskar. Greetings from India to everyone, and especially we are meeting on a very important day. Greetings for the auspicious occasion of Eid ul Fitr as well as Navroz, and today also happens to be World Poetry Day. So let's hope the World Poetry Day we will have a poem of love and peace. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting this invitation. It is very much appreciated, Professor Jagdish. And to the United States of America, we also welcome Arthur Mobley, who is a journalist and the IEC Lawyers Guide observer from the United States. A pleasure having you this day, dear Mobley.
Absolute pleasure to be here, Clarice, and hello to all the panelists from all parts of the world. This is certainly an important program.
Indeed, as we continue to educate and widen the understanding of global affairs, seeing how it is shaping the world's trajectory of international corporations and globalization. And we are also glad to welcome Dr. Andimba Ukweni, geopolitics expert from Nigeria, but he's joining us from the United Kingdom. A pleasure having you as we continue to talk about this global war of influence in Africa. Cannot be left out because it's a very vital actor when it comes to the new changes around the world. Dr. Andy.
Thank you, Clarice, for having me, and a warm welcome to all the analysts in the house. I look forward to a really interesting conversation tonight.
You, Dr. Andy, as we usually do on Global Insight, contextualizing the concept of global influence. I would love to have your holistic analysis, definition of the key terms, and of course, before we go into the major or other aspects of the term of global influence and how it's shaping the world now.
Okay, thank you, Clarice. So why don't we discuss the global war on influence? We assume that there is a global stage where countries are necessarily engaged in the pursuit of relatively personal and seemingly self-interested goals. In the pursuit of these goals, there are certain concessions that have led these countries to identify goals that are among objectives. Now, the trajectory for a global stage that is seemingly friendly and equitable is one that allows an equitable pursuit of objectives, if you like, foreign policy objectives, foreign policy goals of individual player, oftentimes state actors, and some other times non-state actors. But we see that there are changing dynamics. This trajectory is experiencing a recalibration where there are changes, and the direction and dynamics of change has been clearly noticeable along certain patterns. These patterns, if you attempt to isolate them, you will see powerful nations attempting to suppress less powerful nations. You would also see attempts to use resources to advance the pursuit of state goals and policies. You will see the changing patterns of warfare from the traditional kinetic warfare to a more information-based, a more psychological-based warfare, all right, that allows information to be deployed, technology to be deployed, towards certain covert or overt objectives. So for a person who attempts to understand the domain of global war and influence, then you should begin to look at key domains such as information operation, which is the use of coordinated and AI trogenic influence. I mean, attempting to use AI trogenic influence where military information, for example, is used to accidentally or intentionally cause harm. You also look at technology being deployed by powerful nations, for example, the United States, deploying technology to their own advantage at the detriment of the other party or the rest of the world. So there's what we call geo-economics coercion, the use of aggressive tariffs, trade wars, and transactional diplomacy deployed with certain underlying conditions, on conditions that are self-serving conditions. So when we look at some of these dynamics, we begin to see the intention of global war on influence changing dynamics from pursuing a united world, a world that is in the pursuit of cooperation and integration, to a world that is divided between those who have resources and those who do not have, or those who have technology and those who do not have, between those who are able to deploy them using the might of contemporary warfare against those who are unable to do so. The right time would come for us to open the can of worms, discussing cases as they apply in contemporary war. But this is like a theoretical background that we can say to a large extent allows us to take a look at what the global war of influence is seemingly pointing to. But thank you.
So much, of course, looking at what it is and how it is shaping the contemporary global setting in the same perspective, still with the conceptual understanding of our topic, and of course contextualizing with the recent or latest global dynamics. We come to you, dear Dragana, having an holistic interpretation of the topic for discussion. In your own perspective, what do you think global war of influence is? And can we say that that is a new connotation that defines a Third World War, or is just a separate tool that has been, in existence over the years, but coming to the fore due to probably the increase in global connectivity and also access to internet and a more deeper understanding of global issues, making it easier to understand and interpret all of these processes?
Yes, thank you very much for your question. Introduction, I will try to explain the transformation of the nature of the conflict. Yes, it's transformed for sure. Contemporary international relations are undergoing a structural transformation that fundamentally changed the very nature of the war as well. The classical model based on direct military confrontation between states with clearly defined fronts, objectives, and endpoints, increasingly giving way to complex and prolonged terms of confrontation. Now we have, instead of linear warfare, we now face a multi-layered system of conflicts in which military operations unfold in parallel with economic pressure, informational campaigns, political manipulation, and psychological influence on society. So this model of conflict often lacks clearly defined beginning or end, functioning instead as a continuous process. What is particularly significant in the shift of the conflict's center of gravity from physical territory to the sphere of influence, whereas wars in the past were fought to conquer the land, today the primary objective is to establish control, I think. To establish control over political decision-making, economic flows, the informational domains, and societal consciousness. In this context, the conflict in Ukraine and the Middle East cannot be viewed as a regional crisis, I think. They represent geopolitical nodes where the interests of major powers intersect and where new mechanisms of power projections are being tested. Ukraine functions as a direct front line of confrontation in the European space, but also under hybrid war, while the Middle East remains an arena of indirect conflict through proxy actors and resources control. What further complicates modern conflict is their diffuse nature. The boundaries between war and peace are becoming blurred, I think. States may be in the condition of confrontation without formally declaring war, while instruments of pressure are applied continuously and with varying intensity. So the key consequences of this transformation is that victory is not longer defined solely by military outcomes. It is increasingly measured by the ability to shape the international system, to impose the rules of the game and maintain long-term influence.
And that is where the problematic lies. How can we then protect the human fabric while ensuring that this, the gamer or probably humanity is not engulfed by this game of influence by major global powers? I think subsequently we're going to answer that the goal is to mitigate the adverse effect of such. In the same perspective with you, ultimately, looking at the topic for discussion this day and the developments that have occurred so far since the dawn of time, and which is very prevalent in the contemporary society, we continue to want to understand these global processes, and of course identifying key words or key terms that needs to be understood, particularly by the 21st century actors, to be able to ensure that be it in the sphere of information and technology, in the sphere of economics and geopolitics, among others, we continue to have in mind the real stakes of global influence, war of influence, and seeing how we can probably, avert the further susceptibility of the human life.
Yes, well, thank you. The real stakes, as you mentioned, are very serious in this day. It's extremely complicated how we got to this point, but I think the world is right now today in the most dangerous place it's been probably in the last 60, 70 years, and certainly since World War II, perhaps since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And we really do have to analyze very quickly how we got here and how we get away from this point. It's, as I said, very dangerous place. I think we have to look at the 800-pound gorilla in the middle of the room, and that is the hegemony of the United States and how it attempts to conduct its political power in the world. It still feels that it is in a unipolar world where it is the lone policeman of the world, and it uses proxies where it can. It gaslights and continuously tries to make the rest of the world misunderstand and deflect from what is actually occurring. So we're not supposed to believe our eyes. We're only supposed to believe what is being said. And in a world where we've jumped quantumly to AI and the technology of deception to just a very standard form. I can't call it an art form. It's more like a junk form. It's trash. It is junk when we look at what the end result is on the knowledge and the ability to gather information of just common people, but also governments around the world. Way too much deception. When we go back to some of the previous wars in recent times, contemporarily, we hear the U.S. officials talking about winning the hearts and minds of people on the ground. Mm-hmm. And that usually is euphemistic talk for the kind of deception that we're seeing. And we have to, as journalists and as analysts, wade through that kind of deception to get to something that is communicatable to the masses of people for their understanding, but more importantly, for governments around the world so that they understand as well. So I hope that we can kind of redouble our efforts to cut through the fog of nonsense and the fog of war, for that matter, to get to a place where we can interpret and explain these facts to the people of our respective nations.
Indeed, and I think that is what is imperative, letting the population understand the real stakes or dynamics of the global world and see how they can probably appreciate some sort of decisions, external decisions regarding their respective nations. And we end this introductory phase with you, Professor Jagdish Khatri. We know that one effect of this global war of influence is that it actually distorts some sort of the culture, or tries to put the identity of a population on a balance because of the confusion that happens in the minds of especially the lower level population consuming the different narratives coming from diverse global powers who are involved in this war of influence. I don't know if we can also add to it as war of affluence as we continue to watch the evolving global trends.
Thank you, ma'am. Our topic is global war of influence.
Absolutely.
But I feel influence is a very positive word, and normally it is used to influence in a positive way. But what we are observing is it's a war of dominance. It's a war of hegemony at the cost of harmony. The assets, the resources, the attention is being diverted to hostility rather than to humanity. And all this we have allowed two self-obsessed people to hold the world to ransom and redefine the agenda of the world in their own terms. As I said earlier, that it's an AI era, but for me, I will repeat that AI is not artificial intelligence. AI in this reference used to be, earlier it used to be alliances based on ideologies. And if ideology is not there, then you are not an ally. But now what is happening is that AI has turned out to be alignments based on interest, on selfish interest. So each country is counting its own selfish interest out of the conflict, whether it is harmful to them, how much harm it is, or how much benefit it is. I would like to say very passionately, long after this war is over, what will haunt us more? The noise of bombs or the silence that followed? Sometimes this silence is more deafening than the violence. And what we are observing today, sadly, is the silence of so-called civilized world to the inhuman barbarism that is being inflicted on innocent people for none of their fault. So this is something that is changing the whole course of diplomacy, of course of the politics. And we need to identify these things. Actually, it is at stake is the multilateralism that was in the offing. And in last few years, we have been seeing that it is multilateralism is to come. And it will become a multipolar world. And again now, this is to reverse that trend to again a unipolar system where one or two persons, they decide the agenda of the whole world. And thereby, they harm the prospects of multilateralism and diminish the importance of institutions like United Nations and try to disrupt the international rules-based order. So this is what is happening. And we must acknowledge it and take actions accordingly. Thank you.
Much, Professor, for that, of course. So, having understood what global influence or global dominance or hegemony, as has been noted, is, it is imperative for us now to, while using examples, highlight some of the tactics that are being used. And I'll come back to you, Dr. Andy, because when we're looking at the present global changes, we discover the vulnerability of African states and especially African media in reacting to these, the effects of such global wars. This we want to look at, take us back to 2011, or let us just say the era of the Arab Spring and other events that occurred in across the African continent. We are talking about Gaddafi and other proponents of Pan-Africanism. We also want to look at Cote d'Ivoire with how Laurent Gbagbo was actually ousted. Then we want to use some of these examples to understand the tactics of global war of influence and how at the end regime change is some sort of an objective towards such a global war of influence targeting a particular nation. Let's understand it with the African context, ensuring that this will help, media across the Africa and other stakeholders to interpret better these global processes, to better position the country diplomatically and geopolitically or otherwise as far as the international status quo is concerned.
Thank you very much, Clarice. So, when you look at the Arab Spring, you would see a regional network that swept the area with bad news, intended to cause division, intended to cause panic, intended to break the will of the people, and ultimately intended to win without fighting. Thus, there is a simple justification that it is far more easier to deploy information warfare than it is to build one nuclear weapon. So which would you rather go for? So you see, that is why we say that this is a warfare of the mind. It is considered cheap. It is considered low risk. It is considered constant. Like physical battle where the war happens 24/7. This one, beg your pardon, unlike physical battle, the war happens 24/7 on your phone and mobile devices. There's always an information that is intended to target or paint a person worse than he actually is. Look at Libya today. What is going on in Libya? What has the absence of Muammar Gaddafi brought to Libya that is so amazing, that is so healthy, that is so prosperous, that is so globally uplifting, comparing with the Gaddafi days? So the dynamics depends so much on the political culture that has been built at the national stage, at the national level. If there is any meaningful conversation, it is that a people who are vulnerable can become tools in the hands of manipulators, in the hands of information-seeking manipulators. And they can go at all lengths to ensure that they hijack the information space at the national level. If your leadership is treated as an inferior leadership, a confused leadership, a leadership that is rent-seeking, that is counterproductive, a leadership that lacks the political will for proper negotiation on the international scale, it is a good example of a leadership that would succumb to the global war of influence. When the political culture at home suggests a complete lack of confidence and goodwill among leadership, if it suggests a disconnect between leadership and citizens, these are loopholes easily noticeable and exploited. If it suggests a feeling of hatred and resentment, these are loopholes that are easily exploited. So, times when analysts come up to suggest lifting people out of poverty, advancing the pursuit of welfareism, so that citizens can enjoy or at least access basic infrastructural and social amenities. It is tempting to safeguard the nation from manipulation in cases. Another example is the Russian-Ukraine war. What would you say was the main purpose of Russia attempting to exhibit that level of dominance against all? It is a deliberate effort to keep itself above its peers, to look like the regional big brother, to look like the go-to contact. The world is changing and the patterns of warfare has drastically followed the direction of that change. When we talk of warfare in the new era, it is beyond deployment of missiles and nuclear weapons. It is the battlefield of the mind, controlling what the people are thinking and how they are thinking, giving them the context to thought, giving them a form of platform where they can express themselves, and from these expressions, a pattern of thought is reinjected back into society. So sometimes it is also really important how social media affect our thinking and affect our conduct. It's a two-way thing. If you understand your difficulties as a people, you can go a long way trying to provide a platform for information to be managed in a way that allays fears, different from a situation where the kind of information that controls the nation is injected from aliens, from people who have completely no knowledge about what you are confronted with and how you intend to solve this. Sometimes the African nations have placed themselves in a situation where they are considered unserious, immature, and irrelevant. When nations of the world are developing technological initiatives, African nations are chasing them for rent-seeking, for loans. When regions of the world are building economic communities and eliminating barriers to trade, African communities are placing tariffs and all manner of barriers to trade, making it difficult for the movement of people, goods, and services. So the original platform where such integration should provide unity and shared commitment to solving real problems.
Indeed.
It is converted into an illegitimate pursuit of loans that oftentimes don't over well with the economies of these nations.
Okay, thank you.
Mortgaging the future of the people, impoverishing the people, and increasing poverty, inequality, and unemployment.
Okay, a whole lot that we can analyze still based on what you have said. But from recent development, we've seen the wind of change blowing across, especially Africa's diplomatic line. We can take a new example as to what the president, the leadership of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, is doing in terms of, rewriting its foreign policies to ensure that these pressures do not, push African governments, because to an extent, according to some pundits, Dr. Andy, some of these economic pressures of the poverty we identify across the globe or across the developing nations is as a result of these pressures of the wall of influence or war of influence from major powers. Subsequently, we are going to discuss that, and we come back to you, Dragana Trikovic. Here we are still looking looking at the tactics of this global war of influence, you know, I don't know if we can use an example of creation of alliances or new organizations as a tool that major powers or some politicians used to bypass traditional organizations that are, have the task of ensuring global order, to be able to influence their decisions or ideologies, and of course bring about their allied nations into this their respective war of influence. We are taking the case of the Middle East, and particularly Iran, Israel, and the United States. We know that the EU and even NATO has been divided regarding Trump's demand for countries to rally behind so as to ensure that the Strait of Hormuz is being made accessible for the economic activities as far as petrol is concerned. So let's look at how these personal interest of nations will always lead to, some sort of entanglement or putting other sovereign states in a state of quagmire, and not knowing the real foreign policy direction to take to be able to mitigate such a crisis situation like what we are seeing in the Middle East, and also the proxy war in Ukraine.
It is a very important question. Definitely, the old world institutions are not functioning, and it's necessary to create new platforms, or to find a way for these old platforms to be functionally. But when I say create new platforms, I am not thinking on this Trump's peace committee, or what is the name of this organization, because it's not connecting to change something in the better way. I think it's all about the money. And definitely now we have the struggle for the architecture of the global world. And the essence of the current global confrontation is not found in the isolated crisis or regional conflicts. What is at stake in the struggle for control over the very system of international relations, for the way the world will function in the decades ahead, I think. And this struggle unfolds on several key levels. It's control of global economy, including financial flows, resources, and trade mechanisms. It's shaping the security architecture as well, meaning the rules that define the use of force and the relations between the states, and the dominance in the informational space as well, which determines perception of legitimacy and political reality, and imposition of the value models which influence the cultural and, let's say, civilization development of societies. And in this context, the central question is no longer who will gain a tactical advantage in the particular conflict, but who will possess the ability to define the rules of the game, the norms, the institutions, and the mechanisms that structure the global order. This is why contemporary conflicts carry historical weight, I think, and they do not merely determine the outcomes of specific crises. They lay the foundation for the future structure of international systems. So this is not a struggle over individual interests, but over the architecture of the world, I think, in the 21st century, over the global order will look in the future, and who will have the power to shape it. So it's connected to Middle East, Africa, Asia, Europe as well, for all countries in the world. And I will say something that I'm from Serbia. Serbia is a really small country in Europe, and it's really destroyed in the last decades. It was a part of a big country, which calls the Yugoslavia. And in the NATO bombing in 1999, the Western powers decided to destroy this big country and create small country, because then they can easily control these small countries in the Europe. So I think that it is in an environment of intensified global confrontation, the position of small and medium-sized states is becoming increasingly complex. Unlike the period following the Cold War, when there was greater space for the political neutrality and for the Yugoslavia as well in the time, such a position is not far more difficult to maintain. So small states increasingly find themselves functioning as zones of influence where the interests of major powers intersect and manifest through various forms of pressure. And these pressures are multidimensional and encompass a wide range of instruments. Political pressure through conditionally diplomatic demands and influence over decision making. So also economic mechanism, including investments, sanctions, credit arrangements, and also trade dependence. And security factors as well, reflecting in the military alliances, the presence of foreign forces. We have the presence of foreign forces in our region, Kosovo and Metohija, in Serbia. The biggest military U.S. base in the Europe called Bonstil. So I think this is threat for stability in this region.
Indeed, stability that can bring the world closer together. But then how possible with interest that has overwhelmed the spirit of globalization? Coming to you again, Otto Mobley, we want to look at still the tactics of the tools that countries use, especially bigger countries on larger nations. Let's take an example of India. I know Professor Jagdish may want to comment on this recently. We are still looking at the process of alignment, a global alignment of nations. When India aligned with the European Union and the US, the condition was for India to boycott Russian oil. And then we as energy, we are seeing the pressure coming as a result of the confrontation in the Middle East. And we see the US telling India that you can go back to Russia and get the oil from Russia. And the EU, on the other part, is reconsidering its plan towards abandoning completely the Russian energy or gas by 2027. We again come to see how these, alignments will go not actually to favor the national agenda of the nation, but particularly to serve the interest of a major power of let's say a middle power, like the case which I just mentioned. And there are a whole lot of other cases that we can use to be able to demonstrate the tactics of this war of influence and how people get entangled without a clear trajectory of the next position to take in line with decisions that will favor the human fabric of their respective nations.
Well, we have to look at the alignments that we see developing in the world today and really think seriously about what is behind the alignments that we see currently shaping up in the world. The World Wide Web, the invention and expansion of the internet is something that's been very helpful. At the same time, it has also been observed as a means of control and dominance. The information wars essentially are where we are today, and I certainly understand that that's the primary underlying topic of our discussions at this time. But when we look at the power and the expanse of the capabilities of the internet, we have to see and understand that Africa and the global South, Russia, China, have to seriously step up their game to be less colloquial and regional and be more international in their messaging, in their informational strategies, and in their efforts to just generally inform the rest of the world, giving them as factual, hopefully as factual as possible, worldview of what is taking place. Africa has to speak for Africa. India has to speak for India, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, consolidation of thought and strategy is absolutely vital to combating the Anglo-American strategy of consolidation of information, and understand that people in America are very openly talking about not only consolidation, but control of the narrative. They speak of that quite a bit. You heard Hillary Clinton talking about it a couple of years ago, and John Kerry, who were both presidential candidates on the Democratic side, talking about we have to control the narrative, or what about the narrative? And that narrative that they were talking about was controlling information, not only throughout what was happening internally in the US, but globally as well. So they're on a mission to flood the world with their perspective on how these things, wars and confrontation, alliances, economic intrigues, how they will come together and shape up to finally conform to what the West and what the Anglo-American structures want the world to perceive. Throw into that the Zionist perspective, and you have what we are confronted with today, a very dangerous cycle of war, a very dangerous predicament and situation that is threatening to literally tear apart the world's fabric and tear apart the world's continuity. So again, I believe that Africa and the global South, the BRICS alliance, have to step their game up so that their ability to define wars like what is going on in Eastern Europe and Ukraine right now, they have to be defined factually, historically, put into context so that people who weren't around in World War II would automatically understand that Ukraine was a part of Russia. Stalingrad was in Ukraine. We talk about and are quick to say Chernobyl happened in Russia, but we don't understand, because we're out of context, that Chernobyl is in Ukraine. We don't understand historically how close we are to the truth, yet how far away we are from the realities of where we are today. So we really do need to, and I want to get back to Africa because Africa is absolutely vital and key to where we go in these information wars and move forward to some greater understanding and maybe some resolution.
And we continue, of course, ultimately to understanding the historical background to what is happening today. Just to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just tuning in, you're on Global Insight. These objectives are being met. So what is the way forward as we continue to see how nations are redefining, changing the patterns of their dealings, especially in line with foreign policy alignment to meet personal interests? We quite note a similar an example 2 years ago where countries identified Africa as a destination for raw materials that they will need to be able to, produce battery and other valuable equipments for the manufacturing of equipment or battery for vehicles. And sometimes to ensure this, they have often resorted to some sort of regime change through pressure, either militarily or weaponizing the situation of young citizens by putting economic pressure on nations to be able to take maybe bow to their pressure. And of course, this is what we are analyzing, and with the panel understanding how we can mitigate the adverse effects of such global contestations among major powers, majority of them who are never actually willing to go along with the new dynamics of the world, that is the emergence of new powers and new structures that continue to give importance to the philosophy of multipolarity and multilateral institutions meeting up with the contemporary aspects of the global world. We go back to Professor Jagdish, still on the tactics used. We want to take a case study of the COVID-19, reports surrounding COVID-19 across Africa and even beyond, so that this was actually a tool that was used to reduce African population. And I think that this wall of influence actually transcend geopolitical tactics, but also looks at this human fabric that we are trying to protect. So we want to understand with you, how can we then analyze this, dominance in terms of medicals or health, and how it affects the respective nations that are pressured as far as this is concerned.
Thank you. As we are discussing, now weaponization is taking many forms. And earlier it used to be only supply of military weapons or providing basics. But now you see the latest trend is you can weaponize the information, you can weaponize the supply of rare earth minerals, semiconductor chips, or funds. So all of these are means to influence and coerce other countries to follow your doctrine, to follow your path. And we have seen, even in fund allocation from World Bank or IMF, those who are closer to West, they get prominence. And that is why there is need to for multi-alignment. at several of, directions and to serve different needs. And we don't have to eliminate the human angle in this. Like recently, just 2 or 3 days back, India has sent medical aid to Iran, although it was said that we are much closer to Israel now. So, with humanitarian instances, they certainly create a positive influence. Like India provided COVID vaccines to more than 100 countries, and some of them even free of cost uh, to help humanity. So these are also positive means of having influence. Now the problem lies is that narrative and perception building. Now most of the media houses in West and even in developing countries, they are controlled by corporate business houses, and they have their own interests, and they certainly they are used by the respective governments to promote their own ideology. So we see that sometimes you say that this country has weapons of mass destruction, and there is war for several years, and so much of destruction is there and nothing is found. And what has happened is that this narrative was built up very cleverly over a period of time using all media channels, all platforms, including even UN Assembly also. So no, we have to see that media that doesn't become weapon of mass distraction to distract people from the real issues or real intentions of the superpowers. Now, again, I would like to see an example, quote an example just recently, 2 3 days back. Netanyahu, in one of the press conference, he mentioned that even Jesus Christ cannot stand the power of Genghis Khan. Now, what does he mean? What does this mindset indicate? This mindset again reaffirms their thinking that might is right. And they want to put it into the minds of the new generation through all means possible, by using technology, by using iron weapons and all the bombardments, etc., just to prove them right. And this is a tendency that is again taking the world much back by centuries. And we will fall into this cesspit. Again, there were some statements by American leaders that we should work for white supremacy. So these are the ways they want to divide people and the nations on different lines, and so that their hegemony is preserved. This is what is to be resisted by uh, Global South, by Eurasia, by Asian countries, and by BRICS Plus. Because safety, security, and sovereignty should always be non-negotiable for any nation, big or small. So that is something that we have to stress upon in these turbulent times, again and again, sometimes unitedly also at different forums. And at times we will have to sacrifice our national or selfish interests also for this.
Thank you so much. If you are just tuning in, this is Global Insight. on the Pan-African Media TV, brought to you by Globus. And of course, we continue to look at the global dynamics, which is very imperative, knowing that the world is a global village. So we are actually in an interconnected society. A decision taken at point A directly affects point B or indirectly affects point C and D. And that is why there is need to understand all of these and look for solutions to be able to navigate these changing times of the post-world wars. In the 21st century now, we are talking some sort of pressure that is away from military competition. Coming back to you, Dr. Andy, you quite said a whole lot of things regarding African leadership. And I think the African continent, 60 years after independence, majority of nations are still trying to reconcile or to compromise the realities of the world of politics, geopolitics, even the social and cultural dynamics, because at one moment or one point when analyzing, you discover that the African identity might deplete if we do not come back to the table to understand and give contextual interpretation of these interconnected events the African way. I will still take a clear example. We know the late president of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe, during the era of the economic crisis, this is some sort of economic pressure that came from the Western world that actually, pushed Zimbabweans on the streets, started manifesting. Mugabe was called a dictator, and same with Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, who was called a dictator. And today, the term dictator is having a contextual definition, because we are seeing global dictators also imposing themselves on everything that has to do with the world, and the decisions of that have to probably affect other nations. So now how can you think, or what do you think can be done, or what are those strategic strategic pattern that Africa can use to be able to probably write a clear understanding of these global events in line with how it is affecting the African continent? Let's take another example, please, before you intervene. When the USA intervened militarily in Nigeria some months ago, we saw many locals like saying the US should come. Even down to the Republic of Cameroon, we saw you talked about what people consume on social media platforms. We saw people calling for the US to enter Cameroon. But then you begin to ask real questions. Do they know the implications of such an action on the sovereign nation? What are the stakes, and what makes it very, impossible for them to understand how the sphere of influence, acts in order that can people can sometimes prioritize, first of all, the interest of the nation before, being tools or catalysts used by whosoever to infiltrate their nations for whatever reasons.
Let's take a good example you cited in Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe's 7-year rule. You see, there were visible cases of economic collapse and systemic corruption that gave way for political repression, and these factors created a situation of desperation and public rage, anger. So, the level we found we have gotten to in Africa today is one that allows people to more than allows people to more readily make themselves available to react more than they are willing to verify the authenticity of the information that is out there. The provocation over time has made it frequent, so frequent that Africa has a large percentage of youth population. So when having gone to the university and come out, a good measure of that population expects to be settled into that society where they have been raised from. But oftentimes they barely even get that. So this creates a sort of rage from the inside that makes them see the state as an enemy, as an enemy of the citizen, an enemy of the people, and never interested in their own development agenda. So it's a little bit tricky to try to, like the saying goes, it is such a difficult task to market a bad product. It is a little bit difficult to try to get the African people to see that calling the United States to their national territory is even a breach of their own sovereignty. You can call for partnership, technical support and collaborations, not a direct interference with internal systems. It's a little bit difficult to convince them, to even make them see this point that, look, what you're calling for is inordinate, it is improper, because they see that as the only light, as at the end of the tunnel. How are you able to prove to these people who see the American society working perfectly, in quotes, who see the American society fighting corruption, in quotes, who see the American society fighting repressive regimes, in quotes? How well do you think the young people of Africa are going to receive the news that, look, it is a breach of our sovereignty to let the United States or any other country for that matter to come in to tell us what to do, or to fracture our rule of law as it has been designed by the constitution of the land? So the better way to go is to leverage on media houses, news platforms, and several other opinion leaders and gatekeepers to drive the message home. It is not enough to sing praises of government. It is not enough to clap for them even when they are going wrong. It is also a duty to call them out when they are at fault, when they are wrong. If we consider this an important duty, I think we would become more responsible, because the leadership are aware that when the media houses carry a bad news, it is affecting their legitimacy. Instead of carrying news that paints a bad government in a good light, let us build a credible accountability system that allows government to become accountable. If they fail, we call them out until we see to it that the right information, the right explanation has been served on the question that is calling for accountability. More than just doing that, I think there should be need for a digital sovereignty, where African nations try to build their tech infrastructure so that they are not completely reliant on foreign platforms like Facebook and X, formerly Twitter. There is also the need to move away, to turn away from trade and open platform, open opportunities turn away from age, I beg your pardon, and open platforms for engagement in bilateral and multilateral trade arrangements. Right? We already have a couple of them, but for sheer lack of political will, we have not been able to maximize the gains. All right. So if we look in that direction, we will probably get find a way to minimize the restrictions and barriers to trade and improve on the free movement of goods and services across the African region. And of course, there is a very important need for energy and internet independence, because when we build a completely independent energy infrastructure and even internet infrastructure, I think that part of the information leakage or part of the information vulnerability that we suffer at the moment would greatly be reduced, right? Because in Nigeria today, you see how government came on the wings of all manner of lofty promises, and I mean, the subsidy has been taken away. The floating of the naira is here. I mean, looking at the macroeconomic indices, for those who want to be too economic in approach, yeah, they'll say Nigeria is doing amazingly well because they're looking at the macroeconomic indices.
Indicators.
But when you look at the purchasing power of Nigerians, you see that this is one of the most terrible moments. So what do you do in a time like this? It is to call for the leadership to find a middle ground to relieve the pains and sufferings of the people. Because at this instant, what we are seeing now, we are currently experiencing indicators, similar indicators that led to the Arab Spring currently in Nigeria. It's okay, but if anybody cares to listen, we are experiencing similar indicators like what we had in the Arab Spring. So it is to be careful and to manage this information really professionally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andy. Still in the same perspective, we now look at the fact that regime change is sometimes the end product of such a war of dominance. To be able to have a stake or a say in another sovereign country, superpowers will always engage for regime change. We still take the current situation that is making headline news across the globe. We're looking at Iran. And reports have indicated that the US and Israel have been very vocal, and particularly the US saying Iranians are suffering and there is need for regime change in Iran. But then pundits have analyzed deeper to understand that when a leader doesn't bow to the pressures or the demands of the supposed hegemons or those who apparently think of that they have the stakes in the natural resources of sovereign states without engaging in very optimal strategic discussions that will benefit both parties, they can demonize the population, use their vulnerability to pressure their countries through radicalization, their leaders, I beg your pardon, through radicalization, protests, and eventual unseating either by coup d'etat or other means, and some through economic sanctions, and you can name the rest. So Jugena, let's look at how regime change to put the leaders that favor the interest of other nations will actually not benefit the sovereign nation. Today, Libya is in ruins. And we know that at this juncture, even Hungary is preparing for elections, and we see some of the officials that are vying for the position of prime minister, which is a vital position in Hungary. Actually, they were very much involved in the Shell saga. We know how devastating the activity of Shell was in the Niger Delta of Nigeria. And a leader at a country will always define a foreign policy stance of that nation and how it will actually affect developing or less developed nations. So how can we, expatiate on this regime change and educate more the people to be conscious on who is voted into into office, or probably some of the indices or the indicators to probably consider, especially by electors before taking this democratic rights of elections that will write a new history or page of a nation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Dragana
Sorry, it was for me,
Trikovic,
but
please,
thank you very much.
please can you
No
mute your
problem.
sound, Dr. Andy? The question was directed to Dragana Trikovic. Thank you.
Yes, that is how I understand it. I think the Western center of powers are just using the narratives like democracy, human rights, freedoms, and so on. And this is just the facade. They are misusing these topics and trying to organize everything to reach their own goals. And also, they are trying to organize the coups all around the world when they don't like some government or some leader in some country. I will mention that we had the first color revolution on new technologies in the Yugoslavia, in Serbia in the 2000, when they changed the regime of Slobodan Milosevic in that time. He wasn't so popular in Serbia, but anyway, it's not correct to be involved in the other internal policy and to decide who will be in the power in our country. This is what in democracy our nation, our people should decide, not Washington or London or any other center of power. So what we are seeing the last year in Europe is more and more obviously they don't have any more red lines. They are directly involved in other countries where they don't like some leader. I think the Orban is under pressure and the Orban regime is under attack because he is against, for example, he is against of supplying the Ukraine with weapons. He is against the war in Ukraine, and other countries are trying to push this war. So I think this southeastern European countries, they have some different policy. And also we saw the reaction of the EU of Brussels when they didn't like the results of the elections in Romania, for example, or in Georgia. It was the same in Venezuela in the past with this Guaido, and also in Belarus with Tikhanovskaya. They are just they just decided to support some self-proclaimed presidents. It's which I think that Tikhanovskaya had a few percents of support. For 2 or 3, I don't remember, but it's not normal to support the self-proclaimed president. It's not democracy. It's torture. It's aggression against other countries. It's influence. They are involved in internal questions of different countries. This is a really big problem. So we have a totally different concept now. Different two concepts of these Western center powers, which they are just using these words like democracy and freedom to dictate to old world their rules. And also we have alternative platforms, the countries in the BRICS, for example, Russia and China and India as well, African country, which are now fighting for sovereignty. And also we have some rebel countries in Europe, like I said, Serbia as well is not a part of EU. But it's the candidate for EU. I hope that Serbia will never become the part of EU, because I think there is dictatorship in EU. It's structure without any human rights and any freedom and so on. So we can see this fight between two different concepts: the people who are fighting for sovereignty and these global structures, the global centers of power, which are fighting for their own goals, and they think they have a right to tell to all other people in different countries of the world, in Africa, in Europe, and Asia as well, in Russia, what they need to do. So this is really a critical moment. But yes, in the last question I said that we all have the problems and we all have the conflicts and we are all under attack. But I'm sure that things will change, because it's not possible anymore to do this, and it's not possible to live in this way anymore. So I think that things will change radically, and this BRICS platform and the other countries who are fighting for sovereignty, Iran as well. It is the lie that Iran has a nuclear program, and that is why they attacked Iran. We can remember that Iran signed the agreement with Western structures, with Barack Obama in the time of Barack Obama. They signed an agreement on nuclear program. And then Trump came and he just decided to go out of this agreement. And after this, he decided with Israel to attack Iran, which is a sovereign country. I have the right to be a sovereign country. But I think the main goal why they attacked Iran, this is not a nuclear program, of course. This is the energy. The Iran is very rich in the gas and the oil, and this is why they want, like in Venezuela as well, they want to get their resources, natural resources. And I think this is the main fight and the main problem. As we know, Europe is totally dependent on energy supply. The Europe don't have energy. It's not rich in energy. The United States as well. They are now one of the leaders in the energy market, but only because they are using the cracking, this process, and they are destroying the ecology of their country. But they don't care. They don't care, and but they understand that in the future they will not have enough energy, and that is why they decided to attack, especially Middle East, which is really rich in this gas and oil. But I think we all need to resist, especially China and Russia, which are the leaders in the BRICS, India as well, and the African countries. And I think that European countries need to join the BRICS. Maybe Hungary in the future, it overstayed in the power. Maybe Hungary will decide to join the BRICS and not to be a part of this dictator EU anymore. Or Serbia, which is not part of EU. I think for Serbia it's better to apply for integration in the BRICS than in the EU. Thank you.
And from what you have said, we can conclude that it is never about protecting the people, but rather having access to the raw materials for personal interest. And it also brings us to say that policies are flexible depending on who is at the helm, and this is where we can draw a line of compromise as to especially politicians are actually coming to power, what to give importance to, especially if the country has to evolve at the same pace with other nations of the world. It now brings us to asking this question, author Mobley, we still want to look at the fact that in our preamble we highlighted the fact that global war of influence is often in a subtle manner, and that's where the term soft power comes in. But then it will be undermining not to actually look at this concept. You know, when we talk about war and its horrendous effect, we think about military confrontations. But then let's try to probably look at the effect of such power warfare on the population, and of course seeing to answer the question if actually it promotes more friction in a subtle way, or rather it promotes harmony and interconnectivity among world nations.
Well, again, thank you for the program, Clarice. The U.S. and the Zionists in Israel, backed by some of the NATO powers and even backed by some of the sheikdoms in the area, have wholehandedly and wholeheartedly jumped into backing not what I would call soft power. This is absolute hardball military tactics, gunboat diplomacy, if you will, things that weren't even imaginable a year or even 6 months ago, have become suddenly a very brutal reality. So they've taken off the gloves, and we are in a full-throated struggle for the survival of the planet. The other day, yesterday, there was some discussion and rumors, because rumors are all we have when the means of communication internationally and international media runs off the rails. You get all kinds of ideas and suggestions that have to be verified some way, that in some way that many of us don't have the means to even verify. So, when you hear things that the doomsday planes have taken off from the United States, these are nuclear-equipped bombers. Those things begin to really perplex and really illustrate how deep the problem is. We look at AI, and I'll get back to that for this reason. When we think about what a deep fake is, that's where you take a video and you create something that is completely fabricated and is not even representative of the people that may be appearing in these deep fake videos. And you have them say things, anything you want them to say, in their voice, and essentially you are counterfeiting their image, their likeness, and like I said, even their voice and vocal patterns. And you say things. That is a very, very dangerous development. And I mean, these have gotten so sophisticated in their technological nature that you have to have special analysis to tell if that is not a fake video, if that is really not Netanyahu, or that is not Trump, or that is not Putin, who is the subject of that video. This is very dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. And I would appeal to all countries around the world to raise the level of violation for producing these kinds of videos to something that would be at least equivalent to counterfeiting money in your country. If someone had done that and attempted to harm your economy that way, these deep fake videos need to be really seriously cracked down upon. so that they become the serious nature that they are in fact presenting to the rest of humanity. But we do have very powerful tools now in that we have, like I said, the internet, and we have the ability to communicate on formats and programs like this. The only difference between what we're doing right here, right now, and what's going on in major networks in the US or major networks in China or Russia is that people know about them and people know to focus in and tune in and get the information that you're providing. It is truly a more competitive world, but that is exactly the marketing tactics in the US that prevail. And they prevail to maintain the status quo, where the status quo it essentially gives them that power. They want to maintain the status quo of what Zionism is and what Zionism presents. They want to maintain the status quo of what white supremacy represents, particularly coming out of Europe, the Anglo-American projection that only Europeans know how to correct things, know how to fix the world, know how to solve the world's problems, know how to technologically expand. This is why I'm saying Africa and the BRICS countries need to seriously step up their game. And I would also advocate that China and Russia be more supportive of African consolidation. Don't continue to allow Africa to be balkanized into all of these micro voices that come out of the African continent and are essentially lost in meaning and authority to the rest of the world. So we're back, and we can continue as you get towards the end of the program.
Indeed, and it is imperative from what you've said ultimately for us to now look at ways in which smaller nations can actually navigate the complexity of this world of dominance or war of dominance with you. Professor Jagdish Khatri, what do you think is the right parameter or are the right parameters that smaller nations can use to navigate this global confrontation to be able to also champion their national agenda, especially when it comes to issues of international, ramifications. Do we think, public relations by nations, investing in huge public relations is already a way forward towards navigating all of the complexities of global war of influence? Professor Jagdish Khatri.
Yeah. I would like to repeat a quote of Sir Winston Churchill, who said the crisis is an opportunity we cannot afford to miss. And this is what is applicable every time the humanity faces a crisis. And perhaps this is the biggest crisis the world is facing on multiple fronts after World War II. So let us take the example of Iran. It is proving its mettle in intelligently fighting superpowers by using cheaper drones to destroy the bigger planes also, or radars also. So the thing comes out is that it is the strategic endurance and resilience that will be the ultimate deciding factor who will win. And that is true for all uh, developing nations. You have to endure, you have to believe in yourself, and just don't fall prey to the designs of Western powers in selling you more weapons or promising you security if you join them. I would like to give an example with regard to Gulf states. Uh, I, that example is from early British period in India. There were so many kings, more than 500 kings. Small states were there. So the British people came and they said, "Why you are worried about your security? We take care of your security. Our soldiers will help you in meeting the challenges of wars and all that. And you just pay us fees and just enjoy." So that is what happened, and the result is history. Same thing is happening with even groups like Gulf states. They thought that having U.S. bases in their premises is a guarantee for safety. And what has happened is that the same bases are becoming, rather than assets, a liabilities to their security. So, and what they are doing, they are parking their billions of dollars of worth money of petrodollars in the American economy. So, they must realize this crisis should make them feel that you cannot outsource your security and sovereignty to some other nation. And same is true with the EU people. And they must also realize that they have been too dependent upon US for all even decision making. So this crisis should give these people opportunity to divert their attentions to other humanitarian areas and for self-development. You cannot ignore countries or continents like Africa. You cannot ignore other developing countries who are fast coming up. And at stake is perhaps the supremacy of American empire. So this crisis should become an opportunity to redesign the world architecture and have a belief in your own strengths and have shared interests, shared. That's my question.
Thank you so much, Professor Jagdish. We are almost culminating. So the last round of talks, analysis pertaining our discussion, and it goes to look at the outlook or what we anticipate to see as the new dynamics in this international game, or probably a war of influence, like you highlighted earlier on, Dragana. You know, the rules of the game actually have changed, and of course it is imperative that we continue to understand and see how to mitigate the adverse effects of that, especially on the population. Before coming to the question, we know that presently in Germany there are protests against conscription to the military, and the same in France and other countries in Europe. As to the case in Germany, we saw protests particularly from students against the new law, which is obliging young Germans of 18 years to actually provide a report of their fitness, or probably the medical status quo, in order to ascertain their viability or feasibility in being joining the local army. But then majority of these students have said in court that they do not want to enter into war for the interest of another country, saying that they do not want to enter, or probably their authorities, especially the Prime Minister, shouldn't drag them, or the Chancellor, I beg your pardon, into war with Russia to defend the interest of other nations. And from this, Dragana, we come to you to probably, give the way forward, or better patterns, especially diplomatic patterns that nations or stakeholders can use to be able to ensure that the population that they are being actually they are protecting is being held in the web of this global confrontation in quest for power and dominance.
Yes, dear Clarice, I will like to confirm that the interest of the people of almost all countries in Europe are totally different from the interest of political elites. And this is, I think, the biggest problem which we have in the EU, because these all political elites were created by the support of these global structures. They are all the same. Baerbock or Macron or Merz, or all are the same. Now I'm not mentioning these leaders in the rebels countries like Hungary or Slovakia, but all these old leaders, all structures are the same, totally the same. So I'm sure, and I can confirm, that the people in Europe, they don't want war, especially not war with Russia, because they remember anyway what happened in the past, especially German people, and the young German people, they don't want to fight. They want to cooperate, they want to develop relations with other countries, other nations, but this totally uncontrolled political elites, uncontrolled by their own people, they won't fight. They really won't fight. They are pushing fight because why they won't? They think that is the only way to protect their own interests, to stay in power. So they don't have any other interest. The only interest is to stay in power. Not to do something good for their own country, for their own people. They're not interested in that as well. So I think that people should be more active, especially now in the next months. We will have spring and summer. I think that people in Europe especially need to mobilize themselves, society, to be unit in this to find a way, unity, to find this way to defend their own interests, because they cannot count on political structures. The political structures in Europe are totally destroyed. I think in America there is the similar problem, because if you look at these Republicans or Democrats, you can maybe see the same political problems and problems with political leaders as well. So we need new leaders. We need young people who don't want to war, who want to fight for their own interests for development, for sovereignty, and not to be controlled by some global structures which have a totally wrong agenda, which are not supported also by people, the most people in Europe. So it's very good to discuss in this format. I think it's very important. We need to have more contacts in the future. In the past, we have a problem because of the monopolization of media by the Western power centers, but now we have much more different platforms, internet and social medias, and we can organize the communication. We need to connect, and we all need to fight against this evil who want to involve all of us in the war, because to keep their own positions. Thank you.
Indeed, it's about bringing a cohesion that will limit the negative effects of power tussle across the global world. And does that warrant the rewriting the preamble of international relations, the key points of diplomacy? And of course, it is about the agenda that will serve humanity, and not agenda that will serve the interests of a collective few involved in taking decisions with global ramifications. Coming to you, Dr. Andy, from the African perspective, as we culminate, at a moment we are confronted with the realities on the African continent, and how it is making it difficult for the nation that is rich in both natural and human resources to be able to have a larger and louder voice along the international arena. Here we want to look at how maybe the practical steps that African leaders can use to be able to make a substantial and firm agenda for the continent at the international level. We know that aspect of Africa's political rhetorics, where we see leaders having more of a personal interest rather than national interest, and we see aspects of corruption, lack of transparency and accountability, keeping the continent at a crossroad of quagmire, making it to look like a tool that powers are using to define their own agenda. But then it's also imperative to stand firm and make your voice heard. Like we saw the high voices coming from Ghana, Sierra Leone, and other leaders across the African continent on the issue of reparations, on the issue of the African continent's representation at the United Nations Security Council. But then when we want to look at internally, the political fabric of the continent is still very fragile. So to be able to have a space in this wall of influence that will always be there, what do you think are those strategic steps that can be done by the present leaders to propel the continent forward?
Thank you very much, Clarice. I want to address this particular question using the four traditional legs, or what you might call the basic assumptions of realism, which sees the brutal struggle for power in a world where there is no global police officer. The first is the assumption that state is the primary actors in the globe or in international relations. I'm discussing this for each of it. I want to put it side by side with your question. I think that in a changing world, states have played quite important roles, but states have actually led us to the multiplicity of wars and rumors of wars in various regions of the world. And right now, you would agree with me that a lot of people, if not every nation, is turning in the direction of more collaboration and the birth of multinational organizations or international organizations with the objective of unifying interests and building bridges for collaborations. I think that African nations, and any nation in the world for that matter, that is interested in developing their competencies and capabilities, one should probably begin to look in that direction, because more than just the idea of statism, if you build the right collaboration and networks, you might get something meaningful out of that. And the second one is anarchy. The assumption that the world is an anarchical stage, right? There is no global government. So far, so good. You might say there is no global government, but beyond anarchy, there is collaborations. There are platforms, there are tables where the world is sitting together. You have the UN, you have the IMF, where people are sitting together. You have the African Union, you have just recently the Sahel states have decided to form their own little union, right, where they are able to sit together and identify goals. So in this regard, I think that nations, African nations, the, 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 the global south should be able to sit together to identify goals and objectives that are realistic, that seeks to address the challenges in their various national states, nation states, challenges that speaks to the problems and difficulties of citizens. And the third one is survival. In an anarchical world, the primary responsibility is the survival of states. I wish that African nations should, beyond just the survival of states, African nations should tie together the survival of citizens, the continuity of institutions of states, the independence of the judiciary, financial transparency, and integrity. I think that we should tie that to the survival of states, because when we are overly dependent on the survival of states, we oftentimes forget that there is need for citizens to survive. Otherwise, there will only be states without citizens of states, and that is a dangerous end. And then states are rational thoughts. If states are considered rational thoughts, the rationality in that assumption is states are able to decipher what is reasonable, what is decent, what would lead to the overall well-being of the citizens. If a state is not doing so, then that state is irrational. And that is the gap. That is oftentimes the gap that is exploited in this global war of influence, where states often considered rational actors are exhibiting and marketing themselves as irrational actors. So when such irrationality is taken abroad on the global stage, it becomes easy to manipulate and hijack such, leading to regime change and all manner of information manipulation and fake news. So I like to keep it that simple. Thank you very much.
And thank you for that, Dr. Andy. We go to the United States with you also, Mobley, for your concluding statement on a topic for discussion. Is always how, what is the strategy, the agenda for maneuvering the realities of the world of the war of influence, because I think we have unanimously agreed that this is a situation that will continue as far as the world probably power tussle is still a reality among countries. But then there is always need to ensure that it's done in a way that is not, a trap for the population or the citizens themselves. So, what do you think, in your own perspective, what should be the strategies, especially for rising powers to use to be able to carve a clear sphere in this global confrontation, and probably make an alternative pattern of exerting influence along lines of geopolitics, diplomacy, culture, and otherwise?
Thank you again, Clarice. From the perspective of space, looking down at the Earth, there are no borders. There are no significant divisions from one geographical area to another. And we do have to come back to the rightful conclusion that we are one people, one Earth, and we always have to bend towards finding ways to live on the planet together. Right now, we are divided in such a way, geographically, ethnically, lines that go back at least a couple of hundred years that have determined our actions in today's culture. And we can't deny that. We can't overlook that. And the way we deal with that is to address it organically. We need to unwind it the same way it was wound up in the first place. You can't just leap forward and change everything automatically overnight, but you certainly can very incrementally move the cultures back to where they need to be in alignment. And we need to understand that if we don't understand anything else from conversations like this. As I mentioned earlier, Africa and the global South countries have taken very bold positions in the last several years by coming together and existing in the first place, but by stepping beyond that to essentially de-dollarize the world's economy, which is something that has caused a knee-jerk reaction from particularly the U.S. and from Israel and to a certain lesser degree, the nations of NATO and Europe. They've reacted very harshly and very strongly and have done so very brutally at the same time. There is a world's policeman, and that world's policeman is the United States. They've reverted to being the sole superpower and are acting as though they are the sole superpower, with the indignation of being able to say to the people of Venezuela, give us your leader, give us your resources, and at the same time saying we want to take over Greenland, we want to take over Canada, we want to take over Scandinavia, and God knows what else. That is the action of a tyrant. That is the action of a hegemonic policeman. So we have to understand where we are to deal with what we need to do to unwind this nonsense. So I would just encourage everyone in the world to get out in the streets and continue to advocate and agitate fiercely for not only sovereignty, but normalcy. We just need to be normal again.
Absolutely.
I'd love to be as normal as we were in December and January. So a lot of work to do, but thank you again for this format.
Absolutely, yeah. We need to be normal, of course, in this world, because when the mind is at war or in conflict, you begin to ask if actually the human activity of the mind, that is reasoning, thinking, has been overwhelmed by judgment, which is always very chaotic. And the reason for such a platform like Global Insight, under the guidance of Globus, is for us to have a clear understanding of these processes, and of course bring about analysis that will apply or appeal with the human values to be able to still have a normal world. We are ending with you, Professor Jagdish, and this is the question. Amidst all of this power tussle in what we have framed as the global confrontation or war of influence, what do you think are those major strategies that can be used to preserve the human fabric or humanity amid all of these global confrontations and discrepancies?
Yeah, this is an ideal opportunity for Global South and other countries to unite not only on paper but in deeds also, and share their resources, their experiences, expertise in finding solutions, help each other. Like just yesterday, China has provided 5,000 solar panels to Cuba, who were fighting for energy and they had no power. So these are the examples that we can help each other. Even small acts of kindness towards each other, they do matter, and they shake the very foundation of these dominating powers. So more we unite at different places, especially in fields like education, healthcare, science and technology, then we'll be stronger together. We have to work as a team, and in my view, the full form of team is TEAM. That full form is together everyone achieves more. Together everyone achieves more. So let us be together and achieve more unity and more success. Thank you.
Indeed, more together to achieve unity, success, and national or global development, where mankind will actually benefit from the philosophy of globalization and international relations. It means, therefore, that there is need to define an agenda. Thus, we are taking some sort of a summary from the discussions presented by our esteemed panel to understand that the global agenda should be that favors humanity, the one that aligns with the values that promotes cohesion and togetherness, and not an agenda that favors the interest of a collective West or a few, and also weaponizing or demonizing the vulnerability of an ignorant population in attaining objectives which do not align with the greater part of humanity. And it is on this note, ladies and gentlemen, that we are drawing the curtains into today's edition of your discursive and knowledge sharing program, Global Insider. We wish you a wonderful moment as you continue to understand new perspectives, new interpretations of global processes for the betterment of mankind. Ensure to have a clear agenda. Do have a lovely weekend. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.